Now we need to look at two really important organelles. They're really important because they have their very own DNA separate from the cell's DNA. These two organelles are part of what we use as evidence for the endosymbiosis theory. Now, we've already watched a video on endosymbiosis theory, so if you need to, go back and review your notes or rewatch that video to make sure you understand what it means. It's a really important theory leading to the evolution of eukaryotic cells from prokaryotic cells. These two organelles have their very own DNA separate from the cell. They also have a double membrane, an inner membrane and an outer membrane, due to the engulfing when they took up residence in a larger cell and then became part of that cell. Another important idea is that these two organelles, if you take all of them out of a cell, the cell cannot make more of them because they are a separate entity living within it. These two organelles are the mitochondria and the chloroplast. The mitochondria is the site for cellular respiration, and the chloroplast is the site for photosynthesis. These two processes, respiration and photosynthesis, are a big cycle of energy, which is what our whole next unit will be on. But we need to go ahead and just get an idea of who they are and what they do, and we'll study them more in the next unit. The mitochondria is found in both plant and animal cells, and the chloroplast is specific to just plant cells. You may have heard the term powerhouse of the cell. That's the mitochondria. That's the job of the mitochondria, to produce all of the energy that the cell needs to do all of the things that it needs to do. So going back to our city analogy, the mitochondria is like the nuclear power plant, creating all of the energy to power the city. So the mitochondria makes the energy molecule. So who is the energy molecule? ATP, which stands for adenosine triphosphate. We're going to learn a lot more about this little guy in our next unit, but I wanted to go ahead and introduce him to you. So ATP is like a battery for the cell. It stores energy until it's needed. So think of your cell phone. It has to have a battery, and that battery has to be charged. The battery can die, and you can charge it back up with energy and continue to use it. Same thing with your tablets or pretty much anything else you can think of. So ATP is like the battery for the cell, and the mitochondria charges that battery up. Now, the mitochondria has a special structure, and that's how you can recognize it in images. It's kind of shaped like a little bean or an oval, but on the inside, the inner membrane is all folded up. And the reason why it's all folded up is really important. So these folds are called cristae. And what the folds do is it allows you to have a huge surface area take up a little teeny tiny amount of space. Because you take this huge surface area that if it was all flat would take up a huge space. But you fold it and crinkle it up, and now it takes up a little bitty teeny tiny amount of space, but it still has all that surface area. And that's really important because that ATP battery can only be made on the surface. It can't be made in free-floating space, only on the surface. So that's why it's all folded up inside, because it increases surface area. Make sure you remember that. That's a really important concept, and I'm going to ask you about it a ton. Why is the mitochondria all folded up inside? Because it increases surface area so that more ATP can be made. Now, this is one place where cells can be different from one another. Your really active cells that need a lot of energy are going to have more mitochondria in them. So your muscle cells, which are always moving and needs lots of energy to produce movement, are going to have a ton of mitochondria. Whereas your skin cells, which don't really do a lot of things that need energy, they don't do a lot of motion, they're just kind of there as an outer layer of protection, you're not going to have a ton of mitochondria because they just don't need as many. Now, the chloroplast is a lot bigger and complicated than the mitochondria. You can see in the picture here all the things I have labeled. Now, very soon, I'm going to be asking you to label a chloroplast. So you may want to go ahead and start thinking about those different bits and pieces. Now, think about this prefix, chloro. We've learned that before. Chloro means green. So a chloroplast is green. It's green because it contains a pigment called chlorophyll. Chloro, green. And chlorophyll is a really important pigment for the chloroplast to have because it's really helpful in gathering energy from the sun, which we'll talk more about in our next unit. Remember, chloroplasts are special to plants only. So if I give you a picture of a cell and I say, is this a plant or an animal cell? If you see chloroplast, that lets you know, hey, this is a plant cell.